Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Manage Better episode number 114. And thank you so much for taking time off this Saturday and joining us for a wonderful, hopefully, wonderful conversation. Uh, all the recent past evidence tells me that it will be wonderful. It's a difficult topic, and I say difficult not because I can't handle it or it should not be spoken about. It certainly should be spoken about a lot more, and more importantly, there should be more work done around than speaking about it. Of course, I am talking about diversity, equity, and inclusivity, which in short these days is term DEI. Uh, could mean different things, but broadly it means equal rights for everybody. In my view, at least, that's how I see that everybody should have the same opportunity to succeed in life, especially at work. And we will kind of limit the topic to work because otherwise this topic is a very large one. Society in general, households, other kind of unregulated or unorganized work environments as well, because that all will be very difficult to cover. And I've been thinking of this topic for this episode. And a few weeks ago, I met the perfect person who could be speaking at the show. And I'll bring her live in a well, maybe a half a minute. But and it was an unusual setting where I met Shreya Krishnan, who I will introduce in a bit. It was a women's conference, women for organized by women for women, of women, and that kind of a conference. And some coincidence, I got invited to be a speaker, primarily being, because having spent some long career in corporate life, you do end up in situations where you have to make choices around DEI and equal rights. Like I keep saying, that's the easiest version for me: equal rights, equal opportunities, those kind of things. So it was a fantastic session for me because I could learn a lot from uh, new perspectives. And it was also special because this was the first conference where my wife attended and I was speaking. So I was under great scrutiny. I did pass. So, but the other joy was that meeting like-minded people who want to do something in this space. So that's where Shreya comes in. But before I get there, I want you to quickly let me know. I can see on my dashboard that LinkedIn, YouTube, and Shreya's LinkedIn all are live. And yeah, I see somebody commenting. So obviously, you can see us live. So a little bit about Shreya. Like I always say, this is a LinkedIn-based show. So the first thing you should do is to go and check Shreya Krishnan on LinkedIn. And if you like her work, if you want to be, getting her updates, then please follow her. And if you know her already, then you can of course connect with her. Uh, Very quickly, Shreya is managing director of AnitaB.org, or Anita Borg is how we grew up knowing the organization. She serves as the managing director currently and also co-host at past Grace Hopper celebration events. Even this year, and I'll check with her. I think this year also it was a joint one. So Shreya was previously executive vice president of marketing and communication at Aon India. She's a CSR specialist and a corporate grooming consultant. You will know why when we have her on screen. Shreya serves on the advisory board of 8 organizations and 7 NGOs. She's an NLP practitioner, Gestalt master therapist, and much, much more. She's winner of the Miss Universal Empowerment 2024, also former corporate diva and Mrs. India Universe 2017. Works in the spaces of activism, dance, theater, poetry, blogging, sustainability, evangelism, modeling, and acting. And now she might be thinking, why did she accept being on this show? This doesn't include any acting, any theory, theater, any poetry. But here she is, considered herself as an earth warrior. And for me, what stuck out was that when I saw her on stage speaking about, you know, commonly called women's rights, in my eyes, equal rights. Uh, she was extremely passionate and she didn't mince her words. and said it the way it should be said. And I wish there were more men in the room because they need the lesson and they need the reminder. The women already know. But in any case, I mean, here she is. So let me add Shreya ji, namaste and welcome to the live stream.
Thank
And
you so much, Ashwin, for having me.
I hope I did not goof up in the introduction and made any mistakes.
No, no,
No,
thank you so much for for the entire works of it. So it's good to be here.
may,
It's
may.
good to be speaking with you because I remember when I was on stage and, like you said, the few men in the audience, all of them walked up to me later and said, "This was very interesting for us." And that's the premise I come from. I'm like, we need everybody to listen to this because the way the world is designed, it's not designed to be equitable for everyone. So
Correct.
yeah,
And there's a lot more work. And the one thing that stood out in your talk, Shreya, was not that it wasn't a talk. It was do something about this, and we don't have all the time. And a lot of people come with this statistic to me, and I'm sure you've heard this, that it might take 194 or some 200 years for women to get equal pay and
yeah,
all that. My view is that I'm not around for that. So I would rather see I would rather see some action in the time that I'm around, and if
no,
that is progress, I will be happy. Nobody is going to be around for 194 years to verify whether that statistic ended up right or not. And personally, I see, Shreya, and you might agree disagree, is that sometimes this statistic is used as an excuse not to do something today. It should have been used as a reason to do something today, but it is often used as an excuse to not do something today because 200 years, man, who's around? Sadly, that's how I see it used. And I sit in a lot of corporate rooms and NGO rooms and a couple of board foundations as well. And sadly, the statistics is seen the wrong way. It should be seen as reason to action, but it is
yeah,
often seen as an excuse. But anyway, you are closer to the topic, so you might have more information and data. Just for all of your audience, my audience, this is a conversational show, Shreya. So it's more like 70-80% you and 20-30% me. And most of my questions are prepared on whatever little I know of the space. And I come from a limited understanding because obviously no man should claim that he understands how a woman thinks and feels and what, unless it comes from the space itself. So I will have some easy questions. You can make it difficult, and then the highlight of these conversations is, of course, that audience has questions. So once those questions start coming in, and that's a reminder to the
sure,
audience also that please put in your questions. Shreya has promised that she will take all questions live, as many as we can fit in, of course,
yeah,
and that's how. So that's the broad thing, and we already have some comments coming in. Sampark Sachdeva. Sampark is a very prominent LinkedIn figure. So thank you, Sampark, for joining us. Important topic, yes. Good to see you here, and quite a few other people coming in. So
great,
the question I have first, and this is from that same 194 200 years kind of conversation, or 150, whatever number, I mean, that it will take so many years for women to be an equal part in corporate life, and of course maybe in society as well. And this is of course global, because in some societies that number is lesser, in some it is much more. So we'll keep all that statistics apart and say that there is a long time away. So my question, and maybe a question many people will have, men, women included, why should then DEI be even a topic when we are not going to be around for that long? Why should we invest time, effort, money, mind space, and maybe have this conversation? Why? Why? So,
so firstly, let me address what you said before, right? You said that
sure.
men should not think that they can speak for women or they understand it because it's somebody else's voice. I would actually say the same about everybody. I think one of the most important things about showing up for somebody is to not stereotype their experiences. Every human experience is unique, every journey is unique. And I think the idea of leading a space of safety, um, which may mean different things to different people, will come only from being consciously aware that every human experience is unique and we can't speak for anybody else. Which is
Yeah.
why I like the word conscious allyship, not just allyship, because allyship is a power equation. Allyship comes from the
Hmm.
privilege of othering, right? Because as an ally, somewhere I put myself in the space of privilege to create a protective space for you. So it's about me suddenly as an ally. Whereas conscious allyship is, it's not about me, it's about the collective. It's about being consciously available in your mind space, in your being, in your existence as an ally. So I wanted to address that first. Coming to your question on why should we
Hmm.
invest in this? There are many reasons why, but I'll start with the first reason. It makes business sense. Businesses that are more diverse and inclusive are better at profitability. And I'll tell you why. It's a simple thing, right? If you put in a room of people who look like each other, talk like each other, come from the same backgrounds, have the same kind of pedigree of education, what will happen is they will end up creating products and services that are meant for people like them. Whereas the world has a lot more of a diaspora that needs to be catered to. So when you widen that circle, and I'll give you the examples that we've lived through, right? A bunch of cis-het white men were responsible for a lot of the way the world works today. So the dysfunction of that is showing up now as we're trying to understand sustainability, ESG, DEI, belonging. As we're looking at this ecosystem, we're understanding the issues that have come up because it's been widely designed by a certain segment of people that came from largely a space of privilege, had access, had opportunity.
Hmm.
Now, when you widen that space, you're automatically bringing in with diversity people from different backgrounds, different schooling, different education, different regions, people who speak different languages, people with disabilities, people who are, LGBTQIA plus. 20% of our world's population is LGBTQIA plus. Why would we want to leave that out? 1.3 billion people have are people with disabilities, and that keeps increasing because with old age, some form of disability sets in. Why would we
Correct.
want to leave those people out, right? So when we build products and services, it has to be built by the people for the people it's being built for, right? So when you don't
Hmm.
have representation in your teams, your innovation is limited. When you don't have diversity from different kind of, and it's not just gender diversity, which is one big chunk of what we talk about. It's also personality diversity. You need the optimist in the room, you need the pessimist in the room, you need the cynic in the room. It needs to be diverse for us to be really be a universal subset of the population that we're building products and services for, right? So it's not just the right thing to do, it's the profitable thing to do. You will automatically be more profitable, you will have a much wider audience. And like our global CEO Brenda Darden Wilkinson, she says, why do you want to leave that money on the table? you
Yeah.
know why should we leave the money on the table? Why are we not putting in more effort to make ourselves more profitable? Because it's statistics, data, numbers have all shown that this is going to help your business and the core central idea of business itself. So with better innovation, but comes better products, with better products, better reach, better access, and obviously better business sense and profitability at the end of it. Next is about the dynamics in the way workplaces are also designed come the same way. When you have more representation, there's this beautiful video that I saw recently where there was this woman who's walking in an entirely disabled designed world. People are only in wheelchairs. So the height at which people are sitting is different. People are only talking sign language and she doesn't know sign language. So it's such an interesting take because when we have the privilege of being who we are and coming from the backgrounds that we come from and being able bodied or having the gender that we have, it automatically erases the existence of a world other than that. Whereas somebody in
Yeah.
a wheelchair, I was in a wheelchair last year. I had broken my leg and I had to travel, and
Mm.
it just puts life in perspective because there are so many things that just change for you. Whether it's taking a flight or the way you see the world, you're suddenly at seat level and the world is torsos. It
Yeah.
changes so much for you, and that's why human experience is important. That's why we should never diminish somebody's struggle or somebody's um, you know because what usually happens is privilege comes with privilege bias. So for
Mm.
us to really remove privilege bias, we need to be able to see people's experiences in the fullness of it. And I will bring in psychotherapy here because I try and match the worlds that I separately occupy. uh, there is a latent sort of innate behavior that we have built as a society towards the way we look and see and function in the world that we are, that needs drastic change. When people
Mm.
ask me why not meritocracy, my response usually is meritocracy fair? Who built meritocracy as a system? For access to meritocracy, who are the people with that access, right? So it's important to understand that, especially in India, you have intersections of caste, you have intersections of region, you have intersections of language and regional languages. There are so many layers and nuances that get left out. The corporate India world that we see is a very small microcosm of the
Very, yeah.
city urban India. Whereas if you really want to drive equity and inclusion, it's all the way down to the grassroots. Not only is it the right thing to do, not only is it the business ethical thing to do, it's also what is necessary for climate change. For us to ensure that our sustainability goals and measures and all of that are met and catered to. So it's so important for us to really draw this through all the way and see it through. And I don't have the patience to wait 200 years for pay parity. I mean, for the same job, the delta is so huge. Men and women earn so differently for the same jobs that they occupy. And that's in no way fair, right? So if women, as 50% almost of the population, are treated as a minority, then you can only imagine how it is for trans people, how it is for LGBTQIA non-binary people.
Yeah.
World is constantly excluding the other, whereas what we need to do is really break down our hierarchy and build more circles. Because in a circle, you're holding each other's hands and walking together. You're not leading from the front. When you lead from the front, you're one voice leading from the front. When you have a circle, it's everybody who's represented, which is why I think collective work, community work is so important to change this. And for workplaces, it's all the more important because when you're building something for the world outside, you need the people that it's being built for on the inside.
Totally. I think wonderful preamble to a conversation. As you were talking, Shreya, I did realize that you know I thought of two examples from my own life career. You can say, not that it is over, but I have seen some life. But about 7 8 years ago, I distinctly remember a meeting where I was sitting, and the same conversation of pay parity and all was happening. And quite unusually, I was very quiet in that room because I started thinking that, man, this is the fourth or fifth time we are having the same conversation, more or less the same people, more or less the same leader. The HR is also same, the same slides. Last 2 3 years, the same thing. And we go back each year. Some of us clap, some of us are cynical, some of us are dismissive, and all of that. I came back, spoke to my HR. We took out a list of in my department what was the pay parity gap. And till then, I confess this life that I used to think that I was highly, fair, and my department had no um, inequity, as to say. And we discovered huge gaps for the same job, similar job, same pay grade, same everything, anywhere between 15 to 20% difference in many cases. Um, some were okay, but those were women who were really superstar women, so they were outshining the men, irrespective of whether they were women or the other guys were men. They
Yeah.
were real stars. So I except those 4 or 5 cases, everybody else was 10 to 15 to 20% behind. Some much more, but those were for other reasons of performance and maybe lack of fitment to the role. And we took 3 years. We corrected it. I kept
Mm.
quiet for 3 years, uh, and several men performers left my team in that time because they could see what I was doing. And but the joy was that all the women who could also see what was being done stayed, and the team was far more equal after that. And I have lived with this example that, look, you don't need 194 years. You need three, maybe four, maybe five. And it can be done. If I, of course, run a smaller team, I'm not running thousands of people, but I think that time the team was around 120 or 150 or so. Um, and thankfully, the jobs were similar, so it was easier for me, I must admit. But my current team, the jobs are not similar, so it might be more difficult. But I want to make this point because it is possible, it is being done, and I'm not saying I'm alone. There are many people, men, women included, who are trying to address this in 3 to 5 years, not 195 years, or whatever the number is. So I just wanted to add that to your comments that, if people in this audience are thinking that this is somebody else's problem in the future, it is not. We have the tools, skill set, opportunity to correct the mistakes of the past. Whether the generations before us had the opportunity, I don't care. I have. So, that's something I wanted to add more as maybe evidence that it's happening.
It is.
So,
It is happening. It's happening in pockets. It is the thing is you recognized it. A lot of times there's no recognition of it because it goes very unseen.
yeah,
Benchmarking is not usually done based on this parameter. While change is happening at a larger corporate level, there's a lot more mid-level organizations, startups, etc., that may not even recognize this as part of their central core agenda. So the minute you set the intent, it automatically becomes better. And you'd have also noticed that the productivity would have gone up, right?
yeah,
So when you're looking at creating these structures, it's about social justice to make way for equity. It's about equity to make way for equality. And that journey, we can't jump straight to equality because it does not, it's not an equal world. It's a differently designed world. So first we need social justice in the system to understand these nuances, and then the journey towards true equality.
fantastic. Maybe that takes us to our second topic. And I had one more example, but maybe I will share that example later. I took longer to share the one example that I had, but it was important. Um, we've used these words DE and I already in this talk, and you live it on a regular basis. Uh, you are an expert in this space, and as a student, I would like to understand how should we see these three topics as different and, of course, as related as well. DE and I. Anything on this so that the audience is a little more educated after today as well.
So, diversity is creating diversity contextually in terms of saying, I want diversity on my team, I want gender diversity, I want
Hmm.
LGBTQI plus representation, I want PWD diversity, I want generational diversity because I want the Gen Zs, the baby boomers, the, you know, millennials. I want a combination of different generations, generational diversity. So, diversity is about designing structures to bring in the voices to the table, right? Equity is to empower them with equal access and equal sort of voice for them to be able to share. Equity is the safety that you can create for everybody to bring their full selves, or at least part of the selves that they want to bring to work without feeling unsafe and feeling that
Hmm.
they have a voice that they can share. So equitable is the whole idea of creating a space that's equitable pay, equitable opportunity, equitable access. And a lot of times the inequities are very unseen, right? For instance, women are held to far higher standards. A
Hmm.
superstar man's standards and a superstar woman's standards are very different. And a
Very different. Yeah.
superstar woman at work is dealing with a very different dynamic at home, because her being a superstar at work, she's being punished at home for that structure. Not in all cases, but in many cases, right?
Yeah.
So the standards we hold women to is far higher. The feedback women get is a far lot more intense, and there's data and research to show that, right? And everything from the way women leaders show up. Research shows that 5 hours of a woman's week is spent in grooming herself to show up, whereas men have 5 of those hours. And week to week it adds up. So there's a certain
Yeah.
expectation and a standard that's already preset. So equity is breaking all of that and really providing people with that ability of empowerment to feel that, one, they are not driven by their own unconscious biases and their internalized voices of patriarchy and misogyny, and two, that it does not exist in that space, right? So that is equity, going deeper down, understanding what some of these are. How do we say it? Like, I would always say, why should a woman in the room cut up that birthday cake and take over the distribution of it? It's a circle. Cutting something with a knife is an activity. You really don't need to have a gender associated with
Gender.
activity, right? You have
And
to take
nobody,
up.
I mean, a woman doesn't have to prove that she's better at cutting a cake than.
Yeah, and the whole idea of this, right? Like, my worry with Siri and Alexa is there's an entire generation of people growing up assuming women are secretaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And
There is
that
research to show that. So
just
that
as
is,
when we were getting rid of that at the workplace, these tech companies have created a deeper bias that
yeah.
might take more than 200 years to get away with.
And
So,
now they're,
yeah.
trying to see if they can get like a unisex voice and not really have gender to the voice, etc. But otherwise, when you look at Siri, when you look at, people can choose. Like for me, my phone has Siri. The Siri voice is a male voice because that's what
Hmm.
I've chosen. But for you to choose consciously to have somebody support you, you need to even know that there is a problem with this innate underlying, web that's built, and that is understanding equity, right?
Hmm.
Inclusion is when you have diversity and equity. If you're not inclusive, if you don't allow for people to feel, I'm LGBTQIA, I'm gay, and I want to show up as a gay person in this space, even if there's one person who's judgmental about that person, it becomes difficult for that person to bring themselves fully.
Yeah.
The reason they need to bring that version of themselves and feel safe is because when they are comfortable, they are at a better productivity. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, they're not dealing with, you know, an animosity in the environment. They're able to really show up better. Inclusion is, I love that quote which says, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is to dance like no one's watching and still be
Hmm.
celebrated who you are. Right? So when you're at that party and when you're dancing like that, you're the breadth of your personality and you're accepted for who you are. Inclusion is also, like, for instance, judgments, right? The way somebody dresses, the minute you have a commentary on that, you've automatically created a space of judgment. So this all adds up when you have judgment about people. And it's also our prerogative, like I keep saying this, we need to teach people how to treat us. Sometimes you have to
Yeah.
tell them what's okay and what's not okay. Like, I take this example a lot. I'm a very happy dance person. Like, I'm the kind of person that in a good music setting and vibe, I would jump on the table and dance. Now, I have had to coach my old colleagues. We were only two leaders in my previous organization that were women, and we sort of would see, me and her would know the biases because we're at the receiving end of it, but nobody else would until it had to be called out or called in. I like calling in because when you call somebody in, you're taking them on an inward journey to reframe it. When you call somebody out, you're like pointing a finger at them, right? So I'll just call that out. So when I saw that there was a sort of lens that people were looking at me with, I said at the board meeting saying, just because I danced on this table last night, it doesn't diminish the fact that I can still sit at this table and take these decisions. I am that and I am this. And if you can't
Hmm.
deal with the polarities of my personality, that is not a me problem.
Yeah,
So you have to
totally.
sometimes really sort of say it for what it is, and you have to coach people and you have to tell them this is how I want to be treated, right? So sometimes it's our prerogative, but what we don't realize is not a lot of people will have the ability, the assertiveness, which if you were, the difference between assertive and aggressive, they say, is your gender. Being bossy and being a leader is your gender. So there is a lot of that at play, even today in boardrooms, even today on
Yeah.
stages. There is a power equation, and the minute you're conscious about it, you will set the intention to ensure that it doesn't show up, and that is how you start changing. It's not a switch. Conditioning is not a switch. Conditioning is you're the frog in hot water. The water is heating up slowly. You're not a frog that's been put into hot water. You're a frog
Hmm.
sitting in a water puddle that is getting heated. It's climate change. We're in the middle of not just the global climate change, we're in the middle of climate change that is impacting us deeply at a soul level. And that needs to change.
No, totally. I think, and I did suspect, Shreya, that this episode might turn out to be a education of some kind, and you are living up to the expectations. So in the true spirit of Guru Shishya, I will. I'll meet you later and say thank you. But right now, trying to find the best questions. So there are quite a few compliments coming in, but those I'm sure you can check later on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
But a couple of questions that I will take so that we can economize and optimize on time. Shiv Kumar, and he says PCC, so I'm assuming the ICF coaching certification. I'm always curious to understand how do we all how do we take all genders. So this is why what happens when I don't use my glasses.
No,
But
I
how do
answered
we
the question. How do we take
take
all
genders
genders
along
along
with falling
without
prey
falling prey to
in
reverse
reverse
discrimination?
discrimination? Oh, so reverse
So,
discrimination, of course, you see this quite a lot. That and I've been in. I'll tell you one part. I've been in a leadership team where the overall guy manager team leader was a guy, and there were seven people, six women and me, and women were from two from UK, one Malaysia, one Hong Kong, one France, I think, one US. So that diversity as well. And so I've seen this. I didn't mind it because we were all coming with a particular agenda and the meetings were really well managed. But I have thought sometimes that how would others be seeing this room, that in this leadership team there are six women and one man, and I was the junior most also. So it was not just that I was the man, but I didn't have a problem, and I loved that leadership team because we achieved quite a lot as a team. But I have often been asked that, how was it being in the team? I said, look, I didn't think of this question then, but now that you are asking, it's a question. So in just adding to Shiv's question.
so when you realize that patriarchy is a systemic issue and it impacts everybody, and that's, when you look at religion as a structure or society as a
Hmm.
structure or capitalism as a structure, when you look at, we're all capitalists, but being conscious about it makes you aware of the systemic issues of what it upholds. Politics, when you look at all of these benchmarks of the way society is being designed, the way our world works, you automatically realize that there is inequities that are very deeply seated there, right? Patriarchy is not a women's issue, it's not a feminist issue, it's a societal issue, because it brings as much context of judgment, of discrimination towards men as it does for women, right? So feminism is about equal rights. It's not about men versus women. A lot of times our understanding of this um, context becomes very us versus them. We start othering the other, right? Whereas when we start seeing it as a systemic issue, we're able to see how each one of these are playing out for both for ourselves and for the world around us. So the minute we stop expecting men to be strong and providers, and you know the minute we start understanding that masculine and feminine are both traits, personality characteristics that you can bring together, and you can actually leverage off that spectrum, you're diminishing the otherness of somebody.
Hmm. Hmm.
First, discrimination comes when there is so much discrimination in the system that now to change the system, you've gone to the other end of the spectrum. And that's
Hmm.
again inequitable. Equity, true
Correct.
equity, is when equality is looked at from a point of view of there's a beautiful example of shoes, right? So in a bowling alley, if all the shoes that were available were the same size and you had to put on those shoes, people with big feet and small feet wouldn't fit.
Hmm.
Sizing is the greatest example of equity that I can give you. The fact that we all have shoe sizes to meet our shoes,
Yeah.
foot sizes, is equity. Equality is giving everybody the same shoe.
Hmm.
Equity is to design shoes that are specific to size. Social justice is when you have one foot smaller than the other or something like that, and then you customize the shoe to fit the person, right? So, the
Fantastic. Yeah.
way to
Hmm.
eliminate reverse discrimination is to first acknowledge why this discrimination is triggering me. And if it is triggering me, what is my internalized voice of patriarchy? What is my internalized voice of misogyny? How is it coming out? Am I really? There's a lot of, I keep saying this, a lot of this collective change will happen when a lot more people do a lot more self work. It's about
Hmm.
understanding our upbringing, our backgrounds. That's why I said I will bring psychotherapy into this. Anil
Sure.
Thomas,
Sure.
who Shiv and I both learned from, says that what happened to us is not our fault, but to heal from it is our responsibility. Right? So I think it's very important for us to firstly acknowledge, and a lot of times people keep silence. When there is reverse discrimination, there is silence. When there is issues like this, there is silence. Silence doesn't help. You need to call it out. You need to pay it forward. You need to call it in. You need to be able
Yeah.
to say for what it is. And until you say it, you're not going to change it. Because when you've not brought attention to it, where attention goes, energy flows. It's that simple. So,
And and just to extend the point a little bit, Shreya, the way I see it, and I don't know right or wrong, but the way I see it is that whenever there is some level of, you can say, adjustment in the society, this is like, in cricket, so one bowler is bowling one way of towards the wicket, maybe leg side, and then he or she is asked to bowl on the offside. They end up bowling a wide usually. This is society's version of, then, of course, in the cricket match it's taking one ball, which
yeah,
is like a few seconds, but in society it might take 5, 10, 15, 25 years. So that equivalent of the overcompensating for a leg side ball to an offside ball and ending up bowling a wide is a 25-year-old. It will take 25 years to adjust to that new direction. And if me and my friends and colleagues and the company I work for feel that I am the victim of this reverse, whatever compensation that society is doing, my problem. The world and society will not wait, should not wait, and this will always happen. It has always happened like this. Whenever society has adjusted, there is an overcompensation, and then things fall in equilibrium at some point.
yeah,
If it is happening, it is a compensation of some kind of a directional adjustment that society does. And ठीक है, mm, we are in the middle of that adjustment. क्या करें? So that's how we see it, and hopefully that helps and Shiv, by the way, a very good question. So thank you. One more, a couple of more. I told you, Shreya, the questions will be more interesting than my questions. But this is not so much a question. Anuradha is saying, Shreya, thank you for bringing out the unseen. Yeah. So thank you, Anuradha, for your comment. Quite a few comments coming in. Ah, for some reason, I can't see this LinkedIn user's
Still
name.
women, yeah, still women work hard to reach the top positions in corporate organizations. Is there a gender gap for promoting women employees? Yes, there is. There is a gender gap not only because of promotions but also because of assumptions. A lot of choices on promotions are already made because that's the unconscious bias, right? Oh, it's a woman. She may not be able to put in the hours. Oh, it's a woman. She may not be able to take on the travel that comes with this role. Sometimes the only way to sort of change that dynamic is to make the processes very robust and not dependent on human bias. The minute it is qualitative as a decision, there is room for human bias to step in. So the way to change that is to actually create structures that are very, very process oriented and measurement oriented, whether it's ROI, ROO, whether it's performance KPIs. There are mechanisms to sort of ensure that unconscious bias is removed out of them. Even with hiring, there is a gap. It's very clear, and these gaps are different in different industries based on the kind of industry it is. It's also different in different countries. Anshuman, like you shared,
Yeah,
there are different countries on a different sort of trajectory when it comes to these dynamics. So yes, there is a gender gap. Yes, even today, when women are promoted, sometimes you will hear echoes of, oh, that was a diversity promotion. You know, a lot of very successful women, their success is attributed to their behavior outside and their equation with their leaders and colleagues. I've been at the receiving end of that. Highly successful women are attributed their success for various things other than their caliber or capacity.
yeah,
Whereas the same is not true for men, right? And like I was sharing before, women who are highly performing, it's about 78% women who are high performing individuals get very intense feedback, which is very direct, very intense, very tough feedback. Guess what the percentage it is for men in contrast? 2%. So that, yes, it's true and it exists and it's real, and we need to see it, and we need to start calibrating ourselves or ask ourselves, when promotion decisions are being made, what is it that's coming in, what is that. And this whole coffee machine chatter needs to stop. It's exhausting, it's unnecessary. Gossip, grapevines, I mean, I have zero tolerance for that, because I just feel that perpetuates this um very it's very off when we're trying to say that we're trying to make this equitable, and then you have people who compete with each other, women who don't show up for other women, women who say that I will not be seen with this person on this particular thing because I'm competition needs to stop. Women are biologically wired to compete in the dark ages because it was about eggs and fertility and perpetuation of the human race. We don't need to bring that into the boardroom.
we
Um,
already have too many men doing that anyway. So,
yeah,
but
so
I get this. Yeah,
yeah, I feel like there's a lot of behavioral approaches that we need to change to really bring our empathy to the table, to bring our compassion, our kindness, our hearts as much as our minds. Because that is when you're able to see the other and say, this was my journey, this was your journey, and I see yours and I see mine, and I'm not putting a hierarchy to our struggle, but I'm creating a space of equitable conversation, you know, to really do that. Because sometimes, like, I know a lot of people with disabilities who say, I don't need you to do extra. Just let me be. Sometimes
yeah,
somebody just wants to be left as they are. They will figure it out. This again power equation of let me help you is not needed. Just
It's not
create a
needed.
space where they can be, by design, by thought, by intention, and then you don't need to do anything else.
And I've seen this, and I can with pride say that I worked for HSBC for a while, and they had this wonderful program for people with disabilities, and much of the HSBC that I worked for was a BPO or a call center kind of a. So it was physically far more easier, feasible, possible to welcome people with disabilities, and it was done. And I won't take away anything from HSBC because it was easier or not, but there are many more companies where it is still easier and they don't do anything. And initially, for some time, there were restrooms and lifts were redesigned a little bit to accommodate. And there was still this group, and we spoke to them, and they said that, look, now you've done enough. You built a ramp for us. You built the leave to us. We will come 5 minutes early and take our own sweet time to get to the desk, and it's okay. You will find us at the desk on time. I will do the adjustment for whatever my
Yeah.
disability requires me to do. You don't have to do any adjustment for now onwards. And it was a very eye-opening conversation because I particularly, and it was my function, and I could see that I was coming from a position of, oh, I need to help this and these people. And then I realized that, look, they don't want this. It is poking them further and reminding them further of their disabilities and the whatever god they believe in, that the god has treated them unfairly. It is a daily reminder to them. Anyway, the world is doing more and much more to remind them, and I'm adding to that reminder that by poking them, can I not be normal? And thereafter I realized, and I would ask some of them, I'm going for a cup of tea, you want to join? And some would join, some would have, because it was quite a task for them to do that journey for a cup of tea. But I would ask the same way that I would ask the others, and I noticed that they realize that somebody's trying to move the needle. So it is possible. It is certainly possible. Just going back to the
Absolutely.
question, Shreya, the question was asked by Kishore Moletti. So Kishore, apologies. Somehow your name didn't show up on this, and if this was Binaka Geet Mala, I would have definitely said in a little bit more entertaining voice. But there you go. Couple of more questions popping in, but mostly around DEI and what is the difference, which you have already covered. So I'll move on a little bit. Uh, so we understood the sequence. This is an issue. Something is being done, not enough, but can be done. More specifically, as individuals, I work in an organization, and uh, I'm sure many audience who are watching it live and will watch this later also work. What can we do as individuals to move the needle? Not everybody will have be in the position to make the changes. For example, a couple of examples that I shared. I could do that because I was in a position of power, and as the head of department, I could make the. I'm sure I missed out on many other changes which may have hurt a lot of people, but at least I'm happy that I could see some and make. But I also recognize that I was in a position to make those changes. I didn't make those changes when I was not in the position. But what can people across the spectrum do to make DI a little bit more real and not to wait for 200 years?
It starts with personal behavior. It's
Hmm.
actually interesting you say that, because it's not just people of power who can move the needle, it's everybody who can move the needle. You said something, right? People are thinking, oh, I'm not normal. But I love the
Yeah,
story where a child asks a mother, what is normal? And mom says, it's a setting on the iron box. That's all it is.
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
so many of us are neurodivergent today. We're recognizing that we learn differently, we behave differently, we think differently, we work differently. And to have a very normative idea of how this functions is where the dysfunction comes from. If we understand
Hmm.
that we're all collectively different and we behave differently, think differently, act differently, work differently, automatically there is room that is coming in for people to sort of widen and soften their approach to the way they work. Start um, going inwards, start understanding your own internal biases. What does that mean? How can you show up better? How treat people the way you'd like to be treated. So some of it is so simple that that's why it doesn't get done.
Hmm.
Sometimes the simplest things are the hardest things to implement, right?
Yeah, we can
How
always
would
do them tomorrow, right? So we
I
can do
mean,
that
yeah,
tomorrow. It is simple.
yeah, I'll be nice
So
after this gossip. It's very exciting when we have this gossip session. Last time I'll gossip. But that's perpetuating a culture of putting it off for later. And honestly, I don't think anybody is asking for special privileges. Everybody is asking for equal access, equal opportunity, equal, pay. Equality and equity are not asking for special privileges. But the special privileges that are given today are because the inequities are so high that it's
so
not special privilege, it's actually social justice that's trying to level the playing field. For you to
yeah,
level the playing field, you have to dig out the stones. You have to the work that needs to be done both at the individual level and at the I don't know if you've ever seen a blind cricket match. It's
I,
incredible, right? They play with a ball which has a bell in it,
which
and there are,
jingles.
yeah, jingles, and the way they set the field, because different people have different variations of degrees of blindness because it's a spectrum. When I went, I was invited when the World Cup, blind cricket World Cup was happening. Samarthanam was doing that, and I had the privilege of watching a fair few matches. It transforms when you've grown up looking at regular cricket and then you see blind cricket. That's the analogy of shifting your mind,
Yeah,
of saying this is also cricket, this is also cricket. Whereas in this cricket, people are blind in different degrees. They play differently, but that's still cricket. And that beauty of that awareness will come only if you're consciously working on yourself. This language that I speak today is years of working on that. It takes work, it takes effort.
it takes.
And that's
And
why and that's why it's hard, because changing a behavior is what will change the overarching approach. Here, you know what we're doing? Corporates are setting DEI benchmarks, they are creating structures, they are saying this is the framework. But finally, at the end of the day, the person sitting at the end of the table making the decision is still a human being who comes with all of their own personal biases, judgments, traumas, all of it. Unless you equip the people, it's like AI, right? Today AI is reflecting the exact same biases of society because
absolutely,
AI is
yeah.
learning from data sets that are biased, that are skewed. So the responsibility is not to change AI, it's to change all of the
The data
structures
set.
that AI has learned from. So the work is anthropological, historical, human. What goes into history textbooks? How many times have history textbooks changed in the last 14 years? What is the role of politics? What is the role of religion? How is all of this perpetuating? Unless it's a collective shift, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. Anshuman, maybe in our 80s, we'll be sitting and discussing this
I'll reach
because
the 80s before you will, but I'll let you know. uh,
so we
but
need action is important. Intent is
yeah,
great, but intent without action is just that, right?
and that's the reason why I wanted a different slant to this conversation. I've attended enough of the slideshows on those 200-year thing, and you said it that day when we met at the Mom Power conference, and the entire almost 1 hour now. You've emphasized that there are things we can do today. There is no need to wait for next year, 5 years down the line, or 195 years. Uh,
That's
we
how
will
we
not be
want
around. Yeah. So I'm glad that you're bringing in the execution bias in this, and I'm fully conscious as a corporate executive for now 30 years almost, that when you execute there will be things that might go wrong, like the overcompensating ball that you will bowl on the offside. If you try 10 things, one might go wrong, but nine will go right, and those nine will may not be enough, but they will be progress. Don't
Yeah.
hold back thinking that I will take the best and the perfect and the most suitable move, because we don't know. I mean, we don't even know what will be the best and perfect and the most suitable.
The
So
brain doesn't know best and perfect. The brain doesn't
yeah,
know
it
right.
doesn't, nothing, and it is all relative anyway. What
Yeah.
is good for me today might be just normal tomorrow. So thank you for that slant, and it was much needed. I will take a couple of quick questions because I do want to respect your time. Toshif Aisha Ansari, what practical steps can leader take to ensure inclusivity is genuinely embedded into workplace? We spoke a little bit about this, but anything you want to share with
One
Toshif
is,
Aisha?
as leaders, it's important that we don't bring our biases into the system. So the work
Hmm.
has to start with us. We need to see inclusion as a lot more than just diversity, because you can have diversity and not be inclusive, and you'll still be dysfunctional. So we need to ensure that inclusion is conscious and lead by example. If there are situations where there is somebody who's not able to speak up, you can, being observant and listening intently can really transform the way you show up as a leader. If you can see body language in the way people's eyes are, in the way people's shoulders are, little bit of intentional observation can go a long way, because you can immediately correct and course correct the room if there is
Hmm.
something that's coming up. Education, awareness, I can't stress more on being part of listening circles, being part of spaces that you're not usually comfortable with, unfamiliar territory, understanding it, learning it, getting the numbers right, not just the data and statistics, but understanding the human experience, understanding what this means to the larger collective, understanding the interplay of our own inner politics, our own inner worlds, and the outer world that we occupy. It's a heavy lift. And but the heavy lift becomes easier. It's like the habit thing, right? For 21 days you do something, it naturally starts becoming a part of your system. So
Correct.
it's one effort every day, to understand one thing every day, to change the dynamic in which you're approaching inclusion. Oh, it's DI, it's like a check in the box, will always be a check in the box, versus, can I have fun, allowing everybody to have fun in this space? Can I make sure everybody is heard, everybody has a voice, is treated fairly and equitably? Is such a dynamic shift. So just making those small shifts every day goes a long way.
Fantastic. I'm sure, Aisha, you got your answer. I will take one. This is more a comment. Ramesh Sood is a regular on this show, Shreya, and you can make out that he's even more senior than me,
Yeah.
and born in a different era. And he currently coaches people, so he's not in a corporate employment, so he sees it differently. Thank you, Rameshji, for first of all acknowledging and sharing, because when people like you also share, you give strength to people who are actually trying to do something, and they feel that they are not alone. So thank you, Ramesh. um, Shiv is back. I think we should charge Shiv for some of his questions now. um, I have a common question. I'm concerned that excessive political correctness in organizations may inadvertently hinder authentic DI progress. Very well said. One
Yeah,
part is psychological safety in organization. However, there is so much to do that true concerns views being reduced to water cooler conversation. Exactly
absolutely.
something, Shreya, you mentioned that
Yeah.
this
We
overly.
diminish. Yeah.
No, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying that we're diminishing it to a water cooler conversation, whereas
Correct.
firstly, actually, more than anything else, I think we all need a lot of humor in our lives. We need to be able to laugh at things. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves. What happens with very severe political correctness is you're not giving room for learning, because you're like beating it down. That's the difference between calling people out and calling people in, you know. And Madhvi, one of our very strong transgender activist voices that we have the privilege of working with, said that. She said, I'd rather call somebody in, because when I call somebody out, I've outed them, you know, I've pushed
Hmm.
them out of that circle. So I love that analogy. And I think it's important for us to, one, be able to laugh at ourselves, and to, you know, build a bone of humor, and to see conflict and contention as spaces of learning, and not as our very fragile egos, very fragile sort of states, come from a lot of deep seated not having worked on the self. The minute you start working on, you know, psychologically, you start going inwards and you start working on that, you automatically tend to feel lighter about it. So you don't become defensive or offensive as quickly. And I agree. I think it's a lovely dance. It's a dance between what can organizations do and what can people in organizations do. And right now there is a skew, but when that sort of levels out, then you're able to sort of really bring it in. But yeah, I think it's so important for psychological safety. And you know, read this recently. It's difficult to create a safe space because safety is different for everybody, but it's okay to
Hmm.
hold a container for everybody's voices to be you know, heard. And sometimes, you know, in the quest for political correctness, we leave out the narratives that are important as storytelling. You need more storytelling to balance out the overly deep political correctness that comes from. So I hope, Shiv, that answered a little bit of your thought process that you kickstarted with, but it's a beautiful one. It needs
I-
to be delved deep into. Yeah.
yeah, I was about to say that, Shiv. Thank you for the pointer, because this is a topic, and if we are being overly politically correct, also, we might not even ask this kind of a question. So the fact that we can address this question is important. So with that, we are over time, Shreya. So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I keep telling everybody that this is like private tuition for me with an audience. So so thank you very much. I hope we this conversation can further, at least as it move the needle for some people, that we don't have to wait for 200 years, and we can take action today, and in our own maybe limited ways, but we can take action. We don't even have to wait for our organizations to take action. We can also take action, and when the organizations wake up, they will wake up, but we can. So with that, any closing comments, share?
I just want to say this, that when you start doing the work yourself without an impetus from the outside, you'll sleep better. That's what's in it for you. You'll
Hmm.
feel better, sleep better, be lighter, happier as an individual, because you know you're changing the deep-seated conditioning over the years around you. So invest in it for yourself, because that itself is a good enough
Absolutely.
incentive. Yeah. Thank you, Anshuman, for having me. Thank you for the
Cool.
conversation. It
Th-
was so enriching.
Thank you very much. I learned quite a bit. And to my audience, if you did like the episode, do share it around. The same links apply, and it will of course help educate more people. I'm not looking for likes and shares and subscribes and all, but if you share the conversation as it is, and help somebody learn a little bit more, thinking that you have learned, please share the light across. That's all. If you don't subscribe, don't follow me. That's okay. Okay, with that, thank you, Shreya, and thank you, my audience. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you, Anshuman.